All right, let's start up the chat. Or not. There we go. Boop, 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 boop. Boom. Let's make sure that's all working. I think that's what it is, right? I hope that's what it is. Let's see. It's gonna get me with the thingy. What is this? The CAPTCHA every time. There must have been some kind of update or something. We get to log in. So hey, everybody that's watching, I have to get the chat working before I can. Yeah. What is when you don't remember your Gmail? Am I right? Oh, that is right. So, I should not have to do 2 captures in a row. The worst. Bro, why so many? Okay. All right, well, I guess we're just maybe not having chat, and I'm sorry for that. I mean, we will, but not the multi-chat, because clearly it's not wanting to do its thing. Rough. Not a fan, friend. Let's get live on Twitch so we can get started anyway. All right, let's see. Let's make sure I'm actually settings account. Yeah, that's definitely it. All right, let's try it one more time. Boop boop. All right. No, I'm not going through 10 minutes worth of captures again. We'll mess with it later. So sorry, you're not all gonna get to co-mingle on the chat. Let's go live on Twitch. And I'll make sure I put timestamps in so that everybody knows when the video actually starts. So first thing I want to do is I want to say hey, and obviously make sure audio is working. So, boop, 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 boop. Yeah, all right. Cool, cool, cool. Everything's up and running. Hey, everybody. We already talked about this a little bit. Obviously, we did the reaction video. I've had a lot of people kind of reach out to me since then. Hey, this is really good. Hey, this is really bad. Hey, what are your thoughts on this? I've had people who were like, "Oh, they look so good that I'm going to go buy an army," and then 2 days later, and then I mean, we're only talking of the course of what 3 or 4 days. Within 2 days, hey, I'm going to buy an army. Hey, this army sucks. Why didn't you warn me? Guy, I did. I'm sorry. We all saw the data or the stream games that people have had, stuff like that, and so we all know. And I wanted to revisit it because I wanted to touch on it because I even had more thoughts after the last stream. We did the last stream and I was like, hey, this is really good. I like the way this looks. And I wanted to revisit that because there was a lot of context that didn't get covered, right? We talked about it. It was, hey, this is really good. But unfortunately, we're all seeing it for the first time. So we're getting that initial reaction. And within even just an hour of getting off stream, I was already picking it apart and going, okay, here's some weaknesses, here's some strengths, let's talk about this. So I wanted to dig back into it with a little bit more objective lens rather than the initial, like, oh my gosh, we get something and I'm excited lens, right? So let's do that. Before we dig in, what we're going to do is we're going to look at the data slate one more time. And here we go. This is the big change, right? If it's a melee attack, improve the armor penetration characteristic of that attack by 1. And then the Archon can now attach to Incubi, which I'm mixed on this. I know a lot of people are pretty high on it. It has play, especially in the new detachment, getting +1 to wound and rerolls. But we're going to talk about that in a minute. What I want to do is I want to probably take this hat off. I forget how warm it is, especially when I've got headphones on, and then my ears get all gross. And you guys, I mean, you don't care, but like I get ear sweat. It's not cool. So obviously we know our faction ability or our army bonus, which is the power from pain. Gaining pain tokens. If your army faction is Drukhari, you gain pain tokens as follows. At the start of the battle, blah, 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 blah. So you just start with 3 base, which we know. And then at the start of any phase, you can expend... nice, I caught the start. Absolutely. Actually, you guys, I started a couple minutes ago, and really I need to share this link, but I forgot to, so we're just going to go with it. I'm not going to stop everything now, so let me close that out. We're going to revisit the data slate now that we don't have that newness. Now that we're looking at it from a little bit different perspective of, hey, we get to... I've had a day to kind of think on it. I've played a couple games with it already. I think I've gotten 3 total games in with the new detachment, and then 1 going back to Real Space Raid. So we'll kind of talk about that, but I already was picking it apart once I got off stream, and that excitement and that newness had already just kind of left. So right now we're talking about what the army rules are, just a refresher for anybody that's watching. Empowered through pain. At the start of any phase, you can expend 1 or more of your pain tokens from your pool. You select 1 unit, and then until the end of the phase, the unit is empowered and gains the abilities listed below. If they're empowered in the movement or charge phase, you can re-roll advance or charge rolls made for that unit. So what's interesting, and this was something that I always thought was kind of weird, is it doesn't specify your phase, it just says in any phase. But why the hell would I want to re-roll an advance or charge roll in my opponent's movement phase? So we can't even use it to re-roll hit rolls for Overwatch, which I think is kind of stupid. And then empowered in the shooting or fight phase, each time a model in that unit makes an attack, you can re-roll the hit roll. And then obviously it's got the new caveat on there, and that is if it is a melee attack, improve the armor penetration characteristic of that attack by 1. So I don't hate this. This right here, it's very pedestrian, but it does kind of open up a couple units that were maybe on the verge of being solid or were only utility, and now it opens them up for maybe something a little bit different. And then we're going to start by talking about the Real Space Raider detachment again, just the rules. Then we're going to jump to the new detachment, and then we're going to kind of pick apart the pros and cons of the new detachment and then how it would compare to the old detachment. I'm going to be coming at this from a more competitive angle, not from a like fluffiness angle or a theme, because I think we all agree hands down, regardless of how you feel about the new detachment, it definitely is much more flavorful for our army, and it is definitely that. So Real Space Raiders, 1 or more Archon models, 1 or more Succubus models, 1 or more Homunculus models. If you have 1 or more of each of these, they give you an additional pain token. So if you have all 3, you start with 6. If you have an Archon and a Succubus, you start with 5. An Archon and a Homunculus, you start with 5, etc., etc. I watched your first stream over this, so I'm curious what updates you have today. What did I get? Okay, we'll get to that. We'll definitely get to that. Let me jump over to the new detachment real quick, because like I said, I want to do both armies or both detachments rules, and then we're going to kind of dig into that. All right. Boop, boop. All right, so here we go. I just want to make sure I was right at the start. Sky Splinter Assault. Each time a Drukhari unit from your army disembarks from a transport until the end of the turn, that unit's ranged weapons have the ignores cover ability, and that unit's melee weapons have the lance ability. It's a pretty solid army rule. Overall, I think we agree. You know, it gets our shooting a little bit better, but our shooting, while it's not on par with other armies, was where we were already pretty good. So again, that's not necessarily what needed fixed, especially when our shooting was what was being brought already. And when I think it's probably, if I had to guess without looking at it, about 60 to 70% of our data sheets are kind of melee focused anyway. Again, the shooting isn't what needed fixed. It's +1 to wound on the charge. So it's not just +1 strength. So if you've got witches, for example, that are strength 3, +1 to wound, you're going to wound regular Marines on 4s. You'll even wound Terminators on 4s because it's strength 3, wounding on 5s, adding 1 to the wound roll. Until the end. Yep. So let's look at the enhancements. While the Bears unit is wholly within 6 inches of a transport, models in the Bears unit have the benefit of cover and stealth. Pretty solid. Again, looking back on it, it seemed really good, but the issue is that we can't put a lot into transports. Witches, Cabalites, Incubi, and obviously like Court of the Archon, and 3 Grotesques. And I guess if you want to put Mandrakes in them, you could put Mandrakes in them. But by and large, like, we don't have a lot of options for going into transports. And for the most part, we're going to be Witches, Cabalites, Incubi. That's it. This does not do literally anything for Witches because -1 to hit doesn't really help them. Arguably, they should probably just have that anyway. But that doesn't really help them because they're still T3 with a 6-up save for shooting. So, cool. You could put it on a unit with Cabalites, and then they'll have cover and stealth, and that will help Cabalites stay on the table. But, again, most of the time, you're going to probably just want them in the transport. You're not necessarily going to want them hanging out. And if they are hanging out, but they're by a transport, I guess that's one of those where maybe you just keep them next to a transport that's already full of other things as well. But at the same time, why would you run foot soldiers in tandem with a transport in that interaction? And obviously, you also have the ability to move the transport, disembark, and shoot. And then if you can't get back into the transport, it does help give them a little bit of survivability. So again, it's not useless with Cabalites. It's solid, especially with Cabalites getting ignore cover. Spiteful Raider. Each time this unit destroys an enemy unit in the fight phase, if the enemy unit was within range of 1 or more objective markers when your Bears unit was selected to fight, you gain 1 additional pain token. This is pretty good. This is the only way you have to really generate an additional pain token. The downside, sitting on a marker, use my transports to body block it anyway. Yeah, and that's usually what we're using them for is, you know, like lane blocking, funneling things where you want them, you know, move blocking other units. And sure, like I might have a unit next to it, but it's one of those where by and large I'd rather just have LFR. And that's what we're going to get into in just a little bit. But Spiteful Raider is pretty solid. The Phantasmal Smoke and Sadistic Fulcrum are cool, but the other two are where the gold is. Sadistic Fulcrum, yeah, and that's, yep, Spiteful Raider. The downside to Spiteful Raider is that, you know, the way I play, I want to put it on a melee unit. Because I want to be able to go, and I want to be able to bonk, and I want to be able to clear it out, get my pain tokens for meleeing something off the table, and then hold the objective, haha. And you can do that, and we're going to talk about that in a second, but you can do that. But once again, and this is not, like, I don't want to sound like I'm just bitching about 10th edition. because I do have a lot of bitches about 10th edition. Obviously, I still play it, and as a player, I feel like as long as I'm not always emphasizing the negative, sometimes we just need to say 10th edition is very much the shooting edition compared to even more so than previous editions. The 40k as a game is almost always balanced around shooting, but 10th edition, for the most part, melee is so bad that it's just gun lines, which is just boring. I don't like playing that. If I wanted to play that, I'd play Votan, I'd play Tau, right? Like, I wouldn't play Drukhari. So I'm still going to bring my melee units. So because of how I play, that's how I want to play it. The downside is that if I do that, and I don't keep a CP, as soon as I take that objective, I'm dead. And therein lies one of the issues that we have with our army. But again, we're going to get to all of that. I'm going to try not to get on a bunch of tangents. I'm going to try to stay focused. Sadistic Fulcrum. Each time you spend a pain token to empower the bearer's unit in the shooting phase, you can select one friendly transport within 3 inches. Until the end of the phase, that transport is also empowered. So that one's pretty cheeky, and you can do some neat stuff with it. But again, what would you put it on? I mean, arguably you could put it on a witch, like a succubus or an archon, if you wanted to do melee with it, because you're going to need to charge with your transports with this detachment. You have to. There's no way you cannot. Because you're going to need to stay close to them, and you're going to need to have access to hopping back in them for some of your units. So you absolutely will need to charge with them. So if you have something like a Tantalus that's got a lot of swings, and you can charge with the Tantalus and charge with the charging unit, like clearly you could just get the Tantalus empowered by making sure once it finishes its charge, it's within 3 of them. The downside is like that boat is so big that it's really hard to maneuver if you're playing on the GW layouts. And then the other problem is that there's just better enhancements to put on things if you're going to play melee. So it's like, okay. That being said, you could put it on an Archon, put it on Kabalites, right? And I'm sure you could just put it like on a Court of the Archon, Kabalite, Archon interaction. And then, again, just make sure it stays next to a boat filled with guns. And then you basically get to empower 2 units for 1 pain token. But again, the issue you're running into is like you're just having to run infantry off the side in tandem with the transport, or just constantly disembarking, ignore cover, and then next turn having to re-embark or whatever. But again, you see what I'm saying is it's a lot of moving pieces that feel like they should work well together, but in practice they're really not going to. Nightmare Shroud is also the money right there, and that one has to go on a Succubus or an Archon. And probably the Archon is the better way to go, but I don't think either way is wrong. And if you don't run witches, that's fine. I run them. You can tell me till you're blue in the face that they're bad, they're not worth their points. I don't give a shit. Like, I play Drukhari because I like witches, and I'm going to bring witches. I've won tournaments with witches. I've done 3 and 2s at GTs with witches. I've also lost every game at GTs with witches. But it's what I want. It's what I want to play. I'm going to live by it. I'm going to die by it. I don't care. Like, I'm not going to not bring witches just because they're not good. I'll just make them work. I'll find a use for them. So again, like, if it were me, I would probably put Nightmare Shroud on the Succubus, and I would probably give her a 10 squad of witches or a 5 squad with the Venom. It depends on what you want out of them. And here's what I mean by that. If you take a 5 squad of witches and you take a Succubus, you have to accept that they're just not killing anything. And that's the way it is. I mean, maybe not anything. Like, they'll kill like 10 Hormigons, right? But for the most part, exactly. And James, that's always been my mantra. Even as a person who plays in a lot of competitive tournaments and events, I am always going to tell people, You play what you like. I will never tell you, here's how you have to play the army. I will say, what do you like? Okay, how can we make what you like work? And that's always been my perspective on 40K. You know, even now with the army being bad and everybody's like, I don't understand why you do that, bro, because I like it. Like, I've played enough games of 40K that I can play this and I can win more than I lose. It's what I want to play. This is what we're doing. I don't care. Each time the Bears unit disembarks, like I said, so you could use that, right? If you run 5 witches, you're not killing anything. Even with +1 to wound, you're not killing anything. Doesn't matter. But you could torpedo them into a unit that has really nasty Overwatch. Even like a Necron Warriors unit, right? Because that's a lot of dice. You could torpedo them into the Warriors unit to shut off the Overwatch so that the rest of your stuff can charge. So you can use that to kind of get that preliminary charge in to deny Overwatches elsewhere. 2 Quartz on 2 Tantalus with a boat and 10 Incubi. No Overwatch Archon and Lilith with 10 another. Yes. And Caleb, we're going to talk about the Tantalus too, because I think personally in this detachment, 1 Tantalus is an auto take. But we're going to get into that too. We've got a local player here that played 2 Tantalus with 2 Quartz and 2 Archons in the real space raid. And he did not enjoy what I did to him when we played. But it was mostly because I just know the army better than him. I've been playing it almost exclusively now for about 2 years. And it was just like, all right, it's not that it's bad. If I know what it does better than he knows what I do, that's really what it comes down to. But yeah, in this detachment, I think the Tantalus is an auto take. So there's that. Let's talk about the strats. And then we're going to talk about the pros and cons and why I don't think this is as good as I initially thought it was. And I didn't hop on the bandwagon of it being super good. I thought it looked super fun, and I think it's an upgrade, but I don't think it's a big one. But we're going to talk about the whys and hows in just a minute here. So Vicious Blades. Cool strat. I'll probably never use it. You roll a die for each thing embarked in it after it fights. And then on a 5-up, you take mortals. If it's a rack, it's on a 4-up. It is. It is. The problem I have is that I can't run mine at any big events because mine's a third party. And I just need to get the GW one. And mine's not even a nice third party one. It's like just kind of a knockoff. It was given to me. And I've just never bought one because I've had it. And I just don't run it at bigger events where they're like, they need the official models and stuff like that. And that's fine. Like, I respect that. But it's a model I need to get. I just need to buy one. I need to bite the bullet and do it. It'll look nicer. It's such a gorgeous model. I 100% agree with you. Vicious Blades is cool. Like I said, I don't see myself using it most games, and it's not because it's bad. It's because you're going to be command point hungry. And I think we talked about that a little bit on the first stream. We talked about, hey, sorry, I'm like really dehydrated and trying to get the lip balm on. I'm not trying to like seduce anybody here. You're going to need command points for a lot of other things. So Vicious Blades is like, maybe you use it when you have a Catan shard, right? Like, I just played a Necron player who turn 1 got area denial. So he like rushed his Catan shard in the middle of the board and killed the Venom that I had put there. Because I think I got area denial turn 1 also when we played. So I flew up, got area denial. He flew up with area denial and killed it. And then my turn 2, I had extend battle lines. That's what it is. But yeah, flew up, took it for extend battle lines. Because then in my turn 2, I got area denial. And then I also got assassinate. So I would score both of them just by moving to the middle of the board and killing the, shard. Yep, and that's exactly what we're talking about. That's where it is good. And that's what ended up happening. Because turn 2, I hadn't spent any command points. So turn 2, I had 3. Because I had mine, my opponent's turn, and then my turn, because I went first. And then I had 1 for discarding a mission. because I almost always discard a mission turn 1, and I almost always discard a mission turn 2. Even if I can score them both, I will almost always discard one. So what ended up happening was I advanced the 5-mana Kabalites that I had dumped out of the boat. So I jumped them out, flew the Venom up. So then I advanced the Kabalites up. Rax, buddy, as much as I like Rax, them being 5 points less than Mandrakes, you're better off just having Mandrakes, just because you're not going to get much else out of them. Like, on paper, their shooting looks like it could be good, but then when you use it in practice, they just don't do anything, because almost all the guns are just like one shot. And then the 6-up invuln, 5-up feel no pain just doesn't keep them on the table the way it used to, because even though this is the less killy edition, it's certainly not the less killy edition. So I can't personally justify bringing more than 1 to 2 units of Rax, and that's simply just to have a cheaper unit that I can leave in my backfield for screening, and then you can always torpedo them at things if you need command points, just to get them killed to get command points. And then if they don't die, the worst case scenario is that they're stuck in combat with something, and you're just kind of tar pitting them until they do die. So personally, I don't think so. Now, you may disagree, or you may find something that works better than I have. But because of how I play, no, I don't think so. But yeah, we had the Catan chart. I ran up. I hit it with grenades from my Kabalites. Did 4 mortals. It had its 5-up feel no pain. Dumped some shooting into it because it was really all I could shoot anyway. And then tank shock, shock prow, and it died. And again, it goes into exactly what you were saying, Kaleth, is that if you've got something like a shard in the middle, and you can stack like a grenades and the vicious blades or whatever just to get a bunch of damage on it, definitely worth. But outside of those like niche interactions, I personally don't see myself needing it, and we're going to touch on why actually really soon here. Pounce on the prey is one of the reasons why. And again, this has more to do with because of how I play, so your interactions could be different. But I definitely want to be able to move my transport, disembark, and charge. Getting an automatic 12 to 14-inch move, depending on the boat, perfect. Like, if I can move a raider 12 inches, and then I can disembark, and then I can charge with the raider, and I can charge with the unit, money, clutch. Especially when you have other interactions that could potentially let you get back into the boat, and we're going to talk about that. Wraith-like retreat. At the end of the fight phase, one of your units that fought this phase, so you can't do it to a unit if it didn't fight. But if it fought, it can make a normal move or a fallback move. And it must end that move wholly within 3 inches horizontally and 5 inches vertically of a transport, and it must embark within that transport at the end of the move. Other than that, if it's witches, it doesn't have to do that, right? So you make a normal move or a fallback move, but unless it's witches, it ends wholly within 3 and 5 of a transport must embark. Most of the time, you're going to want to embark anyway, unless you've got like a place of cover you can run to. But that is an awesome strat. Every game that I have played, and again, part of it is because of how I play, right? But every game I have used that strat. We're going to talk about my list, and we're going to talk about where I think some of the issues I'm running into are. Also, pounce on the prey. We talked about Skyborn Annihilation. Until the end of the phase, ranged weapons equipped by your models in this unit have sustained hits 1 or sustained hits 2 if it's a Kabalite Warriors unit. That's awesome. That is super awesome. Again, I don't play a lot of shooting, but absolutely should do that. And honestly, just using that on a Tantalus, really good because of the amount of dice that you could throw. Excuse me. If you put If you run 2 to 3 Venoms and you stack that thing with 10 to 15 Kabalites and they all have the special weapons, however you want to do it, right? But if you do it that way, let's say you put 3 of them in there. There's 3 Dark Lances you get re-rolling hits with sustained hits 1. There's 3 Splinter Cannons that already have sustained hits 1. There's 3 Blasters. There's 3 Shredders, etc. You guys get what I'm saying. But then the Tantalus just rolls 12 dice. And those would get sustained hits 1. So again, very, very good. I like that strat. The problem is that, like, I would prefer to play more melee-centric, but I think what I'm going to end up having to do is play the more balanced playstyle that I was playing and just kind of lean into the shooting still. Again, like, that's not why I play Drukhari, but even throughout the real space raid, I've had to bring 2 to 3 units of Kabalites every game. Whereas in 9th edition, I would almost never bring Kabalites. Like, I would bring 1 unit, and it was the, what are they called? The Super Kabalites, Trueborn. The Trueborn, right? So, Swooping Mockery, also pretty good. It's just a 6-inch move if an enemy moves within 9 of it, right? So your opponent's move phase just after an enemy unit ends a normal advance or fallback move. Kabalites are a melee unit with guns. Accept it. You know, in some ways you're not wrong. Just because witches, their melee is basically that bad. That's the thing, Martin, is that, like, you've always been able to play them mixed. Like, for as long as I've played the army, you've always been able to play them mixed. And I don't like shooting, right? Like, that's just never been my play style. You know, I've always been a melee first with shooting to support. Yeah, and that's fine. That's how I feel about shooting, because literally any idiot can stand there with a gun and shoot, right? Like, and I'm not putting you down. I'm just saying, like, that is what my perspective is on shooting, right? I've met Tau players and I've met Votan players, and I'm just like, yeah, okay. Like, and again, I don't mean anything maliciously. I'm just joking. But yeah, no, that is exactly how I feel about shooting. It's just two people. Like, if you're both playing shooting armies, the game becomes very boring because it can very quickly devolve into, yes, yep, and that's what we're doing, is we're doing a big kind of like dive into it. Yeah, and that's it. And it's one of those, like I said, I will bring shooting for support because you need to have things to deal with tanks. But what I don't like is I'm going to disagree with you, and I'm going to say that Drukhari is not a mixed army right now. It's a shooting army. Like, yes, you can bring a couple of units that bonk, but when you fight other armies that also bring units that bonk, their melee stuff just fights better. Yeah, absolutely. I'm mixed approach kind of player, especially with. Yeah, and I think the courts are pretty neat, and I do like seeing everybody having fun with those. I think those are a really solid unit, and the ability to do different things with them is awesome. Absolutely. But yeah, Swooping Mockery I like a lot. It's the free move. The Night Shield, one Drukhari vehicle from your army that was selected, blah, 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 blah. So I actually completely forgot about this. Uh, mm, I'm going to stop you there, and I know you and I had a little bit of a sidebar conversation about this. Yes and no, and we'll get into that. You're going to get like 1 to 2 turns of good melee, and if it doesn't do what it's supposed to do, your whole army's going to start to fall apart. And that's where we're going to start steering next. Night Shield, I actually forgot completely that I had this, and arguably, like, this could have changed the outcome of a couple of the games, just because, like, everything I did just felt like an uphill battle. But that's basically where I've been this whole edition. Is like, I go into every game going, man, this is going to be almost stressful in some ways, right? We got to. Oh, is this just to show the datasheet change? No, this is the. Oh, it's because it's a whole index. There we go. So that's the strats. Uh, Hey Chris, thanks for your content, which is great. Played a game last night and popped Night Shield twice and unfortunately rolled. Yeah, hey, thank you. I appreciate that. I love it. I'd love the Harlequins to be super melee style army and the Drukhari more mixed. The Harlequin, so it was hard to, yeah, and that's, like I said, we're about to dig into everything you guys are saying right now. Um, Real quick before I do Martin, uh, Harlequin's awesome. I will die on that hill, but you could play mono clowns right now competitively and do pretty well if you know how to play. And like, awesome. Wait till we face strike first or fight on death or break initiative strats, then our melee flops. Fight on death, really rough. And that's, okay, so one game I played was into orcs. And the gentleman I played is an exceptional player. His name is John. We play a lot of games, and generally speaking, in 10th, he's definitely beat me more than I've beat him. In ninth, we were pretty 50-50 with each other. The issues with this detachment, and they became apparent just from John and I talking before we even played. Pain token management is tough. Super tough. Witches don't have infiltrate. I don't even mind that they don't have infiltrate. Like, give them -1 to hit. Give them strength 4. Give them the old blade artist ability. Give them 4 attacks. Like, there's so many things that you could do that wouldn't take much to make witches worth their 9 points. Because even with Lance, we're going to talk about it, like I said. But it became very apparent that pain token management is very tough. Because in the new detachment, you start with 3. No, I get it, Martin. Because I play what I think is fun, and I just lean on my skill a lot to try to carry me through games. And I'm not saying I'm like the best player in the world. I know I'm not, but I also know like I'm pretty damn good at this game. And so it's one of those like there's a lot of times where I'll just play stupid stuff because it's fun or it's funny, and I'm just like, all right, let's see how far my skill can carry me today. But the pain token management is really tough because you have to kill units. The command point management is really tough, but that was already an issue we had. The downside is that now that we have, with this detachment, 4 or 5 pretty good strats, or the combat drugs, right? Like, give me the option to give them +1 strength or something else, but yeah, whatever. Or just give them all anti-infantry 3 up. But yeah, no, can't have that. Martin, we're going to talk about that because, like, I get it. Witches are bad. They have some play. Had a thought time last night in Pain Token. Yes, yes. Pain Token and command points are your biggest issues. And, my thoughts on this detachment are you have to really slow down turn 1, turn 2, which is already how I play. My turn 1 and my turn 2 are almost like a gimme. And to me, so Raul, I hope I said that right. Raul, to me, pain tokens or custodes are one of the matchups we have that are really good. So we'll come back to that. But the management became an issue because if I didn't kill things, I didn't get tokens. And I was running a Chronos. I'm not running 2. It depends on the list. But again, we're going to kind of come into that. Uh, uh, can't? Don't say can't. I've seen it happen. Uh, so with Drukhari, the things that I found that I have the hardest time interacting with is anything that doesn't have the vehicle keyword and anything that doesn't have the infantry keyword. So like if I hit a bike heavy list, if I hit anything with the mounted or monster, so like orcs could be tough because of the squigs, right? So it's one of those, like, that's where I've struggled, but that's, again, how I've kind of built my lists. So, going into this game, I had kind of a silly list, and it was a lot of witches, but it was broken up in venoms, and that's the mistake. Yeah, I know. That's why I wasn't even sweating that, but I'm going to come back to that, Caleb. Uh, they were broken up in venoms. It was 2 squads of witches, Lilith in one, a succubus in the other, broken up in venoms. And what I should have done is put them in raiders, because 5 witches and a character don't kill shit. Even with +1 to wound, even empowered and getting bonus AP, they just don't kill anything. And that is what it is. But 10 witches with all of the stuff that you can give them, now we're talking about some actual damage output. If you've got, and Lilith is still the better choice, although the sustained hits is pretty solid. Lilith is still the better choice because of the strength 4 and the bonus AP. So when you empower those witches, they're going to get strength 4 +1 to wound at -3 AP with 30 attacks. A Dark Lance, buddy. That's what a DL is, or the down low for those kids in the know. So with 30 attacks, if you're hitting on 3s re-rolling, you're going to average about 25 to 27 hits. I forget what the exact math is, but at strength 4 +1 to wound, you're going to average on a custode, right? With witches, you're going to average wounding on 4s, 13 and a half, 14 wounds. They're going to make half of those on average. That's 7 failed saves just from the witches themselves. Was that two custodies dead, plus Lilith gets to come in and just like give them the atomic elbow. And if she's hitting her 8 attacks, hitting on 2s, re-rolling with sustained hits too, you're going to average about 10 to 12 hits every time she swings. And wounding on 2s means she's only going to miss 1 or 2 of those. So again, she's going to kill another 1.5 to 2. So between the whole brick, you can kill 4 to 6. Yeah, that's right, James. I don't play Magic, but when I used to, I was definitely a green player. I'm just going to turn everything sideways and math is for blockers. You got it. But she's going to kill 2 to 3 by herself as well. So between her and the witches, they should either clear or cripple a smaller block of custodes. As for the Necrons, sure, they don't kill them all. They don't need to kill them all. They can cripple the shit out of that unit too. And if you have the command points, you can just snipe the characters out with Lilith and then just let the witches kill what they can. And then the witches, and again, Necrons are one of those armies where, like, I have a good matchup. I have yet to lose to Necrons, and I've played 5 to 6 games against them. I agree. I think my mistake was putting them in Venoms, buddy. I think they need to go in Raiders. They've got to stay in the 10s. And what I'm doing now, because I'm already locked into my list for the league, what I'm going to do is just end up running my Venoms in tandems and just kind of like multi-charging with everything in the hopes that I can still kill everything with it. And that's what I was getting ready to say, is the witches, like, I have such a favorable matchup in the Necrons, because cool, you can fall back and shoot, but how many Necrons are you going to lose when you roll 10 dice and a 1 or a 2 is just a dead dude? And that's where it gets really interesting. So though I did play them, I was at top table at an RTT, and I played the Necrons player, and I slammed 10 witches and the succubus, and Lilith, into a squad. And yeah, they had full character support, but I still killed like 14, 15 warriors. And he brought, I don't know how many back, 5, whatever it was. He brought some back. But then he had to fall back, and his dice were just so bad that he killed over half the unit. This was Index, Martin. I was playing Index Necrons. Even Index Necrons, I have not lost a game with Drukhari. And again, it's a much better matchup than people think. But again, my list, I don't run a lot of Dark Lances. I run a lot of haywire because I just got tired of running into custodes with 4 and 5 up invulns, and I just got tired of running into this vehicle that had a 4 or 5 up invuln, and I was just like, fine, man, like, I'm done with this. You can just pick them up. And then if I just hit something that's monster heavy, oh well, like, hopefully I can roll a bunch of 6s. If not, it is what it is. But again, it's just how I've kind of built my list is just like, all right, well, if you have infantry and if you have vehicles, for the most part, you're just going to pick it up. You have to make it a desperate escape test if you fall back from witches and you have the infantry keyword. So if you have infantry and you want to fall back from my witches, you have to roll a die for every model that's in the unit. And then on a 1 or 2, that model is dead. Not a mortal wound, it's just dead. So what ended up happening that game I was telling you about, he had about 10 to 15 warriors in there, and he had to fall back to try to grab an objective, but he just, like, it's a dice game, and he rolled so poorly that I think like 8 or 9 of them died on the fallback, and he couldn't do anything after that. And it's one of those, like, sure, it was a lucky die roll, but he was getting hammered pretty hard that game anyway. And that's fair. If you play both armies, that'll give you a little bit more insight. But it's one of those, like, I get it. I've just not had issues, but a lot of it probably stems from, like I said, just how I build my lists. You know, most Necrons, they do what they do, and I understand what they do because I play against them very regularly. Yes, yep, they 50%. You got it, Caliph. So that's your first issue is going to be pain token management with this detachment. You have to kill things. Now, obviously, if you've got guns, you can shoot some stuff off the table. You'll generate some pain tokens. But here's your downside, is if you don't kill things, you've just spent pain tokens to do nothing. And even with Kronos being a 4-up, yeah, and I don't, buddy. That's what I'm saying. Like, I get it. I understand why they do it, but that ain't me. You know, I'm just going to run haywire, and I'm just going to run some melee, and like I said, if you've got the monster keyword, I guess I'm just going to, shake your hand, and we'll see what happens. So it's one of those, like, it is what it is. Yeah, yep. You got to have some racks for the pain tokens for sure. But yeah, so the pain token management, you gotta bring at least 1 to 2 units of racks, I think, in this detachment. Even if it's just to put them right on the front, advance them up the board, grab an objective, and just be like, come kill it or leave me on the objective. And because you've got to get those pain tokens as early as possible. You know, your shooting has got to be on point, and you can't rely on the Chronos to just keep regenerating pain tokens. So it's one of those, like, yes, you'll get them, but what happens when your dice are bad and you don't? The command points are, like I said, it's weird because we've always had CP issues, but they're magnified in this detachment because we've got Night Shield, right? We've got Swooping Mockery, which is pretty good. We've got Skyborn Annihilation, which is pretty good. Tank Shock, yep, and we're going to get into there. Yeah, well, he didn't kill my Venom, buddy. And for everybody that's watching, Bill's Knots right there. That's the guy I was talking about. Played him. He was one of my first games with the new detachment. Wraith-like Retreat, pretty good. So we now have just like all of our stratagems are pretty good and very usable. Which means we're going to be out of command points. A lot. Especially when you still want to use them for things like Tank Shock or grenades. And that was one of the issues. They're really good. But that was one of the issues I ran into every game was like, well, shit, I just don't have the command points. And I don't spend a lot. You know, like I said, a lot of times my turn 1, I'm discarding a objective. I play tactical anyway, just because it's just better. And And that's what that's what I'm getting ready to talk about. And that's why I think tactical is just better. For Drukhari specifically, I'm not saying it's better for everybody, but for Drukhari specifically, it's better because it gives us something that almost every other army has, and we don't. And that's access to some sort of command point generation. Whether it's Gretchen with a 4-up. Yeah. Gretchen, giving a 4-up. Junith and Sisters just give it to you. And then, like other armies just have them. They get Eldar have the Autarch, right? So a lot of armies have these things where it's like, well, if I have this, I either get one or I want a 4-up, I get it, whatever. Or they'll have things that give them access to doing it for free. And we just don't have any of that. So I will take tactical every turn or every game, and then turn 1, here's what I do, right? I look at my objectives. What's the easiest one? Hey, thanks for coming in, man. Yeah, for sure. Void Weavers are 125 now. I mean, I'm not surprised. They're going to point Craft World out of the game rather than just rewrite the index. And it's one of those, like, I'm not hating on Craft World. I like the army. I like clowns. I like elves. But, like, their index needs a rewrite as much as the Drukhari one does, and as much as, like, the Death Guard one did when it got launched, right? They just need to be rewritten from the ground up. But yeah, so turn 1, I'm going to look at what my 2 objectives are, and I'm going to pick the easiest one to score. Exactly. And I'm going to score that one. And if I can score it without touching the middle of the table, I'm going to, right? So I'll discard 1, get a CP. So I'll go into my opponent's turn with 3 command points. I'm sitting all right. Right? 1 at the start, 1 for discarding, and then 1 for my opponent's turn. And if I go second, it's the same process. Turn 2, there's a good chance I'm doing the same thing. Like, my goal is to go into turn 3 with about 4 CP. Necrons, Harlequins, and Drukhari. So I have Battle Sisters, Drukhari, and then I have a little bit of Harlequins. I don't have a ton. My brother and I share them, so it's one of those, like, I think we have like 1,000 points right now, but we used to have a lot. Like in 9th edition, I used to run a game store, and I had a massive Quinn's army, and a lot more Drukhari than I even have now, and I have a lot now. So, but we had a structure fire, and I lost all my armies and stuff, so I had to rebuild. And I decided going into this that I was only going to focus on 1 or 2, and that was it. So that's like, I want to go into turn 3 with like four command points if I can. But here's the problem, right? Looking at these strats, it's like, okay, how do I manage this? Because I could justify using every single one of these in a single turn. And then still wanting to use grenades, etc. And this is where I think that I appreciate it, Martin. Everybody was fine. Unfortunately, I was the only person that lost anything. And that makes me happy, right? Unfortunately, like, my apartment was above it. I literally walked out of it homeless. And, at the end of the day, though, the community was awesome. We all came together. It was very good. And I'm still running events and doing stuff to drive the community. And at the end of the day, man, like, I'm still here. And that's all that matters. So, but yeah, so this is where I think Real Space Raiders has the edge. And before everybody's like, oh, God, you're crazy, hear me out. Real Space Raiders has 2 good strats. And then, like, 1 or 2 situationally good strats. That's exactly how we got the name. You got it, buddy. But if I have 2 good strats, my CP management just got a lot easier when I have very limited command points. And not only are those 2 good strats very good, in some ways, they're better than all of these. Lightning, I missed lightning fast reactions a lot. Not having access to it when I played it, I didn't realize how much I leaned on it. And it doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're talking about like, oh, this thing hits on 4s, well, I can make it hit on 5s. This thing hits on 5s, well, I can make it hit on 6s. It does improve the survivability of a lot of your units. And then the Homunculus Coven -1 to wound strat. And I knew I was going to miss that right away. Because that one is the one I use all the time because I run 2 to 4 Talos every game. They're just too good. I refuse to run 6. I just won't because it's just not me. That's not how I play. I don't want to spam, and 4 is almost spam. Yeah, I don't know. I even in ninth when they could Alpha Strike, I didn't. I still played turn 3, and again, that's just my play style. Basically, 1 and 2 is setup. Turn 3, I hit the gas, and we just let Jesus take the wheel, buddy. So it's one of those, like, that's just kind of how I've developed as a player, is 1 and 2, I'm doing minimal damage, and then turn 3, I'm going to hit really, really hard. And then if I don't, that's it. Game's over. So it's a really weird interaction. Like, I play to prevent alpha strikes rather than play to make them. And I think that's also part of what throws people off when they play me is they're like, oh, it's Drukhari, they're just going to come at me. And then when turn 1 and 2, they're like, oh, I haven't really taken any damage. It almost like lulls opponents asleep. And then, bam. What I will say is with the new detachment, well, hear me out. We're still not winning. I don't think it has to do with losing access to -1 to wound, because you can still take the real space raid. I think it's just because you can't run them in Ynnari. So they're just like, haha, we'll just give these points drops, and then anything that's really good that can be run in Ynnari, ramp them, ramp them. Yes, yes. So that's the other thing. Alexander, whichever you prefer, just let me know. That's the other thing, though, is like with tactical, you can make up for lost points. And that's where it becomes okay. Is if you know you're just going to have 1 or 2 turns where you're just burning an objective, you can make up for lost points with tactical. And I don't have to score 100 points every game. I just have to score more than you. And that's the other thing to keep in mind. The issue you run into with Drukhari also is the primary game, but that's a whole different story. So the first drawback I see with this detachment, though, is the command point management, right? The command point management is really rough. And you have to plan, if you want to use your strats, you have to plan on it. And I noticed it right away. My game with John, first of all, I was way too aggressive. And a lot of it was just like, I have this ability, I want to use it, let's go. Actually, no, that wasn't John, that was my brother. I played a game with my brother. My game with John, I was actually really timid, but the problem was that I just couldn't kill things. But we'll get into that. The game with my brother was hyper aggressive because it was just like, I want to bonk, I want to do things, let's go. The second issue, like I said, the first issue, you have too many strats and not enough command points. So what you're going to want to do is probably just pick 2 to 3 of those and say, these are the 3 that I'm just using. And then if I have the ability to use the other ones, I will. But for the most part, I'm only going to use these 2 or 3, and I'm going to game plan around these 3. Because otherwise, you're going to be spoiled for choice, and you're going to end up not being able to manage. Pain token management is much harder. It doesn't sound like a lot, but losing access, even if you didn't run the homunculus or you didn't run a succubus, you're going to run an archon and you're going to run either Lilith. All right, Nick, sounds good, buddy. You're going to run an archon and you're either going to run Lilith or a succubus or a homunculus. You're going to run 2 of the 3 in the real space raid. There's no reason not to. So you're going to start with 5, and you're going to give somebody the Art of Pain so that they can generate one every turn. There's no reason not to. Typically, what I would do is I'd put it on the homunculus, and I just put like a 5-mana Rax on the backfield objective for screening. and then I just let him sit there and give me a pain token. And then if somebody charged him and killed the Rex, cool, I get another pain token. So I'm just getting pain tokens every turn. So with that, I didn't, Ben. We're gonna get to that in just a little bit. Give me just a couple minutes, because that's the next step of this is how things are getting run and how maybe we should look at breaking down units. So I did talk about the enhancements, but we'll kind of get back into that. Uh, so the pain token management is really rough. Okay, thanks, Alex. Sounds good. Uh, because we've got to have units dying. First of all, we can't lean on Battle Shock, and I think we all know that. Like, Battle Shock is not interactive enough that we can rely on that for pain tokens. And a lot of that has to do with, like, our boats losing the -1 leadership penalty. You know, not only did we lose melee on the boats, not only did we lose faction keywords on the boats, we also lost the leadership penalty on the boats. So, you gotta have at least one Chronos. I know, like, I've had people tell me, well, you should run two, and they're probably right, but I'm not gonna. I think one's fine. And then when it comes to breaking down your units, you're gonna have two enhancements that you're gonna run, like I said, and don't quote me on them. Actually, we'll just let's jump back to them real quick. You have Spiteful Raider, and then you have Nightmare Shroud. Those are the two, right? Like, those are the two that we're gonna use a lot. Now, if you're playing a game like I play, like a more melee-centric style game, I'm going to probably put Spiteful Raider on the Archon, and I'm probably going to put him into Incubi. That's just me. The smarter play is to probably slap him on a court, slap him with Cabalites, give him the enhancement, and probably put him in reserves. Unless the whole unit will fit in a Tantalus, then you could put it in a Tantalus. I can't remember how many models it comes out being with the court. I can't remember if they're a 5-model unit or not. Let's look it up, because I know, I just can't remember exactly. So, we'll get to the Chronos. Give me a second. We're going to get to those in a minute. Because a 9-inch bubble's pretty big. Court of, how many models is this? Unit comp. 1, 2, 3, 4. So yeah, okay, so you can. So and that may be, like, to me, that's the smarter play, is to maybe put them in a unit of Cabalites, and then put the Court in there, and then put the Archon in there, and then you can put them in a Tantalus, or you can even put them in reserves or on the table. I wouldn't put them on the table personally, but again, being that I tend to interact a lot more in tournaments and competitive play, I tend to just, like, see a lot more indirect, and that's the next thing we're going to talk about. So what I personally would do is slap it on the Archon, give it to the Incubi, and then I would just make sure I have one command point ready to put them back in the boat. So what I would do is I would probably move up, disembark, charge with the boat, charge with them. Hopefully they kill with +1 to wound and full rerolls. I'm not saying they will. I'm just saying hopefully. Good point, Caleb. 2 Chronos, perhaps. Hangs back. So that's how I would do it. And then keep that command point handy to get them back in the boat so that I'm not just getting slapped off the board immediately. But like I said, the smarter play is to probably put it on something that shoots so that you don't have to get up close and personal constantly. New rule for disembark after reserve is clutch with the sustained 2 CP. There's a new rule for disembark after reserve. Is that in the data slate? Caliph? Because they did a FAQ that said absolutely not, you cannot disembark after coming in from reserves unless you have a rule that says otherwise. So if there's something else that changed that, let me know. In the rules commentary, let's pull it up. So like I said, the last I had looked at that was in the FAQ where they were like, you can absolutely not do that. So let's look at the rules commentary. Cool rules. All right, further rules. Updates in errata. What are my key documents? There we go. Rules commentary. All right, so arriving as reinforcements from strategic reserves. When a reinforcements. Do you guys know exactly where it's at? Or can you screenshot it for me? I guess you probably can't post it in the live chat. I don't know. Mostly because, actually, here, let's just look up the rules commentary here. Rules, Terry, 40K. Boom. Yeah, and racks you definitely are going to need. Yeah, no worries, Caleb. I'm going to... Is this the newest? Let's see. Let's just go to Warhammer Community. And the Ravagers, they're good. I can't complain about them. That's just not... yeah. The big thing with the Ravagers is that they're ballistic skill 3. That's where I think they're just better. Sustain hits strat only works if transport moved, and you can no longer use the strats that check for moved on things coming in from reserves. Let's pull it up real quick. Downloads 40K. Rules commentary. Here we go. Let's make sure we got the newest one. Core rules errata. Abilities with the same name. Yeah. And I thought so. Alright. Bam, bam, bam. Adding models to a unit. Arriving in the first battle round. We don't need that. Battle shock tests. Note that this is true even. Bam, 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 bam. Are we looking at this one right here? Counts as having made a normal move? Yeah. And that's where I'm leaning towards maybe just dropping Scourges, except for one unit with Haywire, just because, again, Haywire, for what I do and how I play, is very good. But yeah, let me know if this is what we're looking at right here. The counts as having made. Yeah, the jump shoot, that's true. No, they have their trade-offs, and really Ravagers need to be about 10 points cheaper, but you can thank our Craft World brethren for that points hike. Reserves units always count as having made a normal move in the turn they are set up on the battlefield. This is simply to clarify that they cannot move further in this phase, but have not remained stationary. Such units have not made a normal move, so arrival cannot trigger stratagems or abilities. So where are you guys getting that you can disembark? I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying if this isn't it, do I need to just keep going? Is there more that I need to look at? Because this to me says you cannot. Maybe it's this one. Units embarked with reserves model. Okay, perfect. Yep, I just didn't scroll far enough. Awesome. Interesting. Sustained hit strat only works on it's a transport moved, and you can no longer use strats. Sustained hit strat. Let's take a look at that real quick. Perfect, perfect, perfect. Swooping mockery. Sustained hits. The sustained hit strat just is predicated on a unit disembarking this turn. It doesn't matter about whether or not the transport moved. So, awesome, awesome. So, Steve, Steve, whichever you prefer. So the sustained hit strat would work because you're not targeting the transport, you're targeting the unit that disembarked. And it's one of those where because they've disembarked, it doesn't say they had to have made a move. It just says they have to have disembarked. If it said something about having to have made a move, yes. But what it says is the unit has to have disembarked. So after it disembarks, you're eligible to use that strat. Reserves units. Okay, so this is super weird. So I don't think it prevents Overwatch. I think I had seen that in the chat. I don't think that prevents Overwatch though, and here's why. Um, Overwatch isn't only triggered by a move. Like I said, I could be wrong. I thought I saw somebody in the chat had said Overwatch doesn't work, but Overwatch doesn't just say move. It says your opponent's movement or charge phase just after an enemy unit is set up or when it starts or ends a normal advance or fallback move. It's the setup portion that would still allow Overwatch for units that come in from reserves or units that disembark. What I will say is from a usefulness perspective, right? This is cool. Uh, we're Hey, welcome back, Nick. Alex, and again, I'm gonna get into there. We did get on a tangent here. That is literally like what I'm trying to get to, but the whole reserves thing kind of caught me off guard. The danger to running something in a Tantalus or whatever and then bringing it in and then disembarking is that your infantry can still get overwatched because disembarking counts as a setup. So when you set those models up, they're still eligible targets to be overwatched. Because when you read disembark, it just says set up. And then when you read overwatch, it's when a unit is set up. Uh, right, exactly. Exactly. The Overwatch strat. So, like, that's a dangerous game you guys are playing if you're planning on playing that way, because there's almost no reason to disembark unless you're shooting at a melee target and you're not at risk for picking models up to Overwatch. Because Overwatch is, like, arguably the bane of our existence in a lot of ways. Okay, so how would I run this. Like I said, we talked about the enhancement. I think the way I run it is I run it on an Archon with Incubi. The smarter play is to probably run it on a big shooty unit and either put them in reserves or in a boat and let them dump out and shoot. But as a person who is fight first, shoot second, like I'm always looking for ways to get into melee. And then if you're like me and you like witches and you're just going to run them no matter what, then what you do is the witches, you have two options. And Alex, this is kind of answering your question. If you want utility units that can be all over the place, you run them in Venoms. If you want them to kill things, they have to go in a Raider. I don't think Overwatch is a battle tactic, so you cannot anymore. And that's fair, Caleb. That is super fair. Overwatch is not a battle tactic strat, so you can no longer use the Archon's ability. That's part of the data slate also. The free stratagem and the point increase stratagem abilities can only be used on battle tactic strats. So it won't affect Overwatch, but that also means you can't get Overwatched for free unless the unit specifically says it Overwatches. So like Space Marines can't use their captain ability to just spam Overwatch. So like my league list is 20 witches and they're broken up in Venoms, Alex. And I think I'm going to have, I feel Sustain His 2 is kind of a trap. We don't have many CPs. And almost 3 very good stratagem, 1 to 2. And I don't disagree with that. Because when I'm done with this, we're going to talk about why I think from a competitive standpoint, Real Space Raider actually still beats this out. And before everybody gets up in arms, let me get through this and get to that. So, my league list is 20 witches broken up in Venoms. And after 2 games, 3 games with it, after 3 games with it, what I found is that I cannot send 1 boat full of witches at most things and expect it to go away. So I have to run my Venoms in tandems. So it's going to take me probably another 2 or 3 games, unfortunately, to get my positioning really down. And if you guys are interested, before I wrap this up today, let me know, and I'll pull up a drawing board, and we can talk about what I mean by in tandems and stuff. But you'll have to let me know in the chat, because if you're not interested, I'm not going to do it. But if you are interested, we'll definitely do it. But if you guaranteed need them to be killing machines, they have to go in a Raider. Because with the 5-mans, you just can't. It's okay, let him be afraid and no Overwatch, and that's also fair. That's also fair is like having that, or if it Overwatches somewhere else, like it does open that up, Kayla. Sorry, I just got to that. Actually, let's just pull up what I'm running for League. And it's arguably, like I said, it's not the best competitively, but I was like, hey, I can make this work. I can win some games. We can do it. And I get to play with the models that I really like. No, but again, that's where I'm running Talos. Talos will kill that block of 6 Tau Crisis Suits. And because every Tau player just smooth-brained Cyclic Ion, I can outrange them. But we'll get to that as I go through my list. So, here's my list. I've got the Archon, and he's got Spiteful Raider. He kills things. I get an additional token. It is in the 10 brick. They are in a Raider. I've got Big Dick Drazar. And again, I apologize if that offends you. That's just, what we call him colloquially. Because he still slaps. I don't care what anybody says. That dude still slaps. I have never regretted bringing him to a game. I also have Lilith, and before anybody asks, the reason I have Drazar is because if I get stuck not in a transport and I can keep those guys alive, I still want to be able to go bonk. And even with dev wounds on his base attacks, even if he gets separated from the squad, if you get some spicy dice, he will make people go, oh, I don't like that. He needs to go away. I do have Lilith, and then she has, her 10 mana witches, and then I do have a succubus, and she has the Nightmare Shroud. Yes. How many units do you take? Witches with Lilith, witches with succubi, incubi with Drazar. Yep, I'm going through it right now, Nick. This is, like I said, this is my league list. My typical, and I can walk everybody through what I normally would play also. It just depends on if I'm bringing a Tantalus or not. So I've got 20 witches. I've got 2 raiders. I've got 4 venoms. Yeah, I also just love them with incubi because, again, especially with the new empowering rules, pushing incubi to -3, I didn't think it would be a big deal, but it's a big deal. Because now for like Marines, it's 6 up or die, and it's just so much better. I have 1 Chronos. I have 20 incubi. Again, it's just for Drazar, and it's for the Archon. I have 1 squad of Mandrakes. I probably arguably play them a little bit differently than I would imagine a lot of people do, just because I'm not here to make them a utility unit. I usually use them as a speed bump. And again, because of my bias, what I am going to tell you is most competitive is going to arguably be a little skewed. I think a lot of competitive lists are going to lean into the shooting. 3 Archons with Incubi and Drazar. And we're gonna talk about that because like I watched that list get shit on multiple times, because you just don't have the staying power. The math on it is wildly, gosh, man, Caleb, like it's because it's a dice game. Like I know what the probabilities are, but it depends on what you're swinging at too, right? Like with +1 to wound. So Drazar with +1 to wound is worse than the Archon getting out of a transport with +1 to wound, 100%. But take away the transport and the math changes. Whenever Drazar blends the Terminators, yeah, that's right. So I have 1 squad of Mandrakes. Like I said, I typically play them as a speed bump. Like I'll throw them pretty far up. I usually forget to teleport them because like they're usually dead. And it's more for move blocking. And if I can grab an objective early, I will. That type of stuff. I do have 2 units of Scourges. It is just Dark Lances. And again, it's just so I have some long-range threats that can kind of move, shoot, move. The downside to Dark or Scourges is one of the downsides that our army just suffers from. And that's if your opponent has indirect, you're only getting 1 turn out of them at best. And then I have 2x2 Talos. The Talos have the Haywire, Liquefier, and then the Gauntlets. The Gauntlets are probably not the best take at this point. Being Strength 8 probably doesn't do as much for me as hitting on 3s would. But I just like the Gauntlets. Like, I like the 3 damage. And again, even if I only get a couple through, it's enough to kill a Terminator, for example. It's enough to, if I get those chip shots in on vehicles, and I can get like 2 or 3 wounds through, people are just like, oh shit, why are they 3 damage? And I'm like, I don't know, it's funny. So that's what I'm running. What I found is, like I said, after a few games, the main thing is I can't send a 5-man of witches by themselves. I have to send them in tandems. Why I like the witches with the venoms is AP3, D3 is amazing though. Exactly, Caleb. And that's it, is neg 3 damage is the bee's knees. Where I'm finding my issues is my positioning. Like the way my list is built, it's very surgical. And if I can't get it to where I need it, it's going to be rough. Now, that being said, here's where this detachment, and not just my list, but this detachment falls apart. You're going to lose transports. They're T8 at best, except for the Tantalus. Show of hands, how many people have lost the Tantalus in a single shooting phase? And if none of you are raising your hands, you're all liars, right? You lose your transports, your army starts falling apart very quickly. And I didn't need to play it to know that. Because, let's look at these strats, right? Where are we? Here. Transport, 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 transport. Right. Yeah, there we go. I'm seeing some hands. I like it. I like it. Exactly. Now, Night Shield, that's on me. I have to remember that because that could arguably help me not get just annihilated. And Night Shield onto Tantalus, very bueno. Uh, you know, I guess it won't count. We won't make you raise your hand. You don't have to join the shame squad. But Night Shield on the Tantalus, very good. But then so is LFR on the Tantalus, very good. You know, again, you wouldn't think it is, but -1 to hit on that big bastard is actually really handy. I have not played a game without Talos. So if you go back to my initial index review, interestingly, um, I said then that I thought the Talos were the best thing in the index. And again, like I had people like, nah, dude, you're crazy. It's Ravagers, and I'm just like, nah. Give me the Talos every day of the week. I don't care that they're weapon or ballistic skill 4. Uh, I will take the Haywire over the Dark Lances, and I will take the melee profile over no melee profile. And the liquefiers, as much as I hate Overwatch, having 2 liquefiers does make people go, maybe I don't want to move so close to those if they've got some weaker stuff. Especially because the liquefiers are twin linked. So it's like, I'm going to get something through. And again, in the old detachment, they're even more durable with the -1 to wound. And then if you bring Piss Boy, Urine, you can heal them, if I remember correctly. Yes, yes, agreed, agreed. The Catan shards, that is what it is. I don't know if they got a points hike or not. They should have. Like, the fact that the cheapest one is almost the same price as a Tantalus can really just eat ass, right? Like, that's absurd. Yeah, the heat lances are pretty solid. I just, again, because of how I've just spec'd my army, I'm just like, nope, this is what I'm doing. So this is what I think. Like I said, I think most competitive players are just going to continue to bring guns. I think most competitive players are going to have the same mentality and attitude that a lot of people do. Good. Glad they didn't. I'm so glad that my Tantalus is almost the same price as something that just does mortal wounds, halves all damage, has a 4-up invuln, and a 5-up feel no pain. So, let's talk about Grotesque right now. Still not worth their points. Here's why. Yes, they are worth for bullying objectives with +1 to wound and the additional pip of AP. Here's the problem. They are 30 points a model, and you no longer have the -1 to wound strat to keep them on the table. So yeah, they get Lance, and yeah, they can get an additional pip of AP by empowering them, but you need an 80-point raider to put them in the boat just to get them out of the boat. So you've now invested 170 points into 12 wounds that has a 6-up invul and then a 5-up feel no pain and won't stay on the table. If Grotesques sat between 20 and 25 points, I could arguably justify it based on their data sheet and how they interact with the game right now. If they would lower it so that they only took up 2 slots and I could now put like 6 in a Tantalus, or just make it to where you could fit a unit of 6 in a Raider, and then they kept them at 30, 100% worth. Damn. Yeah, you right, man. I didn't even think about that. I'm gonna have to pick some up because I just have some kit bashes and some 3D third party ones. I'm gonna have to do that. I like that. But yeah, so like at 30 points a model taking 3 slots in a transport, I'm not spending 170 points on that when I could spend 170 points on almost anything else and it would just be better. You're going to get 3 liquefiers out of it. And it's just like, man, for 190 points, I could just put 10 Cabalites in a Raider. For 170 points, I could put 10 Witches in a Raider. It's one of those, like, I like Grotesques on paper, but they either need a big, big points drop or they need to take less space in the transports. Even if they just, like... Nice, Caliph. Even if they just said, hey, you can only put these in a Raider, but you could put a unit of 6 in a Raider, fine. I'm fine with that. And then keep them at 30, cool. I'll do it. But for what you get out of them and the fact that you basically can only ever run 3 at a time, nah, I'll pass. The T5, I think? 6-up invuln, 5-up feel no pain, 4 wounds each. It's just like, it is just not worth with how killy this less killy edition is. So again, going back, competitively, lots of shooting is what we're going to see, I think. I think we're going to see maybe some Venoms with... Well, that's why what I'm saying is, like, even if they just said, hey, you can only put Grotesques in a Raider, but will allow you to put 6 in that Raider. Not necessarily take up less space. I just worded it wrong. But yeah, you're right, because they hold 11 and Grotesque would still technically be 12. But what I'm trying to get at is, like, even if they just said, the only way you get to put these into transport is in a Raider, but you can put 6 of them in the Raider, fine, cool, awesome, sold. But yeah, you are correct. I think you're going to see some Cabalites, and actually, one of my buddies is just, like, on that hype train right now, and he's just like, oh my god, I'm going to play Drukhari, they're so good, and I'm like, they're not going to be that good, man. They're not, like, it's not quite an upgrade, but it's not quite not an upgrade. Right. It's just like, it opens our toolbox up a little bit more to some units we wouldn't normally use, and it gives us more stratagems. But the problem is that all of the inherent weaknesses of our army are still there, and our damage output doesn't actually change that much. I mean, you might be right. Under strength. I'd have to find the under strength unit rule, probably. I believe that is the case. Any inside baseball on whether he's... No, I don't have any insider, unfortunately, buddy. Like, I don't. I wish I did. And to be fair, like, even if I did, all I could say to that is, yes, I do. And that would be the end of the conversation. But no, I don't. I think the structure of the game, personally, what I think is the structure of the game as we know it right now is what we're stuck with until 11th. I don't know if it'll change in 11th. I don't like mandatory unit sizes. I don't like free upgrades. I think it's one of the reasons we're having so many balancing issues with the game. But no, my buddy's on this hype train. And he's just like, oh, Drukhari looks so good. Here's my list. And it's almost all Cabalites and transports, right? And I like him, good dude, but he is like in some ways the quintessential competitive player. So he'll go and he'll look and see what everybody's running, and he'll be like, "Yes, this is very good. I will run this," which is fine. I'm not putting him down. It's just that's just not how I play. So it's one of those like, if this is what he's coming up with, I'm sure he's in competitive talks with other people, and they're all like, yes. But like I said, the problem is that all of our inherent issues are still there. Okay? And here's what I mean by that. Let's pull this up real quick. All right. Exorcists are 180 points. You're probably still going to see 1 to 2 in every sister's list. It's one of those. I'll have to check the roadmap. I don't know. We were on the roadmap. I just don't remember where. It's a valid fear though, for sure. Sisters players are probably still taking 1 to 2 Exorcists at 180 points, just because most of their anti-tank sucks, and that's strength 10, neg 2, d6 damage. Hey, guess what? They got 2 Exorcists. You're picking up a transport a turn. Like, your opponent has 2 to 3 Plague Burst Crawlers. Hey, guess what? You're picking up a transport or 2 every turn, and there's nothing you can do about it. Oh, we weren't on the. I thought we were paying for those sins in ninth. No. So, and I don't know how much you played him in ninth, but in ninth, Drukhari was only like really good for a short amount of time. I shouldn't say short. They were really good until the aircraft nerf hit. Because they did the one data slate and it toned down the homunculus coven stuff. Because the homunculus coven stuff was the stuff that was really abusive early on. And then when the aircraft nerf hit, that's what really kind of like tanked them. If they were paying for sins of ninth, Custodes would not be good. Because Custodes was absurd when they came out. Votan isn't necessarily great, but they're not bad right now. And overall, it's a solid army. So like I said, like if you hit anybody with indirect, this detachment can fall apart very quickly. Simply because if they don't have anything to shoot but the transports, they're just going to shoot the transports, especially if they're a good player and they know that it just shuts off our army. Right? So if you hit 2 exorcists, I'm just going to send them both into 1 raider just to make sure that raider goes away. I don't care. I've got miracle dice. I'm going to use them. It's going away. Because now I don't have to worry about that unit getting out and getting all kinds of bonuses. I don't have to worry about you disembarking them to give them lethal hits. Doesn't matter. And that's, again, where I see this detachment being, it's going to fall apart very quickly as transports get blown up. And now your stratagems are useless, and now our infantry are just dying. And we lose the ability to punch above our weight class. So like I said, what this detachment does is I don't think it gives us competitively a better army. I think it opens the door for more tools in the toolbox. Night Shield might save versus 2 Exorcists, but then that's command points you're not spending on other things also, Kalith. And that's where, again, fine. You're going to spend it on the 4-up invul. Now you're not going to get lethal hits. Or now you're not going to get this, right? So it's one of those, like, you're right. But at the same time, if I go first in turn 1, I'm making you spend your command point. And then turn 2, I'm making you spend your command point. You're playing from behind with your resources every turn now, and it's just doing what I need it to do, right? So it's one of those where, yes, you're right. It could. It absolutely could. The problem is that there, especially, again, if we're talking specifically sisters, you fail 2 of those saves, like 1 from each exorcist. if I haven't had to use a miracle die to get you to fail those saves, you're picking up that exorcist. Like, there's no ifs, no ands, no buts. Or not exorcist, you're picking up that raider, right? Because I'll just grab a miracle die and be like, cool, you take 5 damage. Cool, you take 5 damage. Well, and that's, like I said, once I get through the weaknesses, like, we're going to jump back to real space raid and talk about why I think it's better from a competitive standpoint. Not that it's a better detachment. Because if you can get this detachment to work, I think you're going to have more success with it. But the amount of time you're going to need to get it to work, based on how and where you're playing, obviously, is going to be a little bit higher. Because you're going to need to make sure you keep your transports alive as long as you can. If you play against guard and they just have a parking lot of basilisks and manticores, you might as well just high-five them and just be like, good game, bro. Because, again, they might not kill them all turn one, but they're going to be able to just keep shelling you and keep shelling you and then move block you and move block you, and you're just not going to be able to kill everything. You're right, dude. Alex, so to be fair, man, I am just kind of that person anyway. I did make it through the full list, but I'll get back through it real quick. So for me, what I'm running, and this is a league list, and this is like the first concept I had, I've got the Archon with the bonus pain token enhancement. I've got Drazar. I've got Lilith. I've got a Succubus with no Overwatch. And then I have 20 Incubi. Any unit desiring me use any single stratagem for free on itself. That could get a little abusive, but I can't argue with that. It would be funny. So I've got the Succubus. I've got 20 Witches. Oh, yeah. This is the wrong list. Sorry, that was not my league list. Same characters. Archon, Drazar, Lilith, Succubus, 20 Witches, 2 Raiders, 4 Venoms, a Kronos, the 20 Incubi, Mandrakes, 1 Ravager, 2 units of Scourges, and 2 Talos. Here's what I'll do, is I'll export it to a doc, and I'll just kind of put a link in the chat here in a couple seconds. I'll probably have to do each one individually. I'll just use my 40k stream list. Paste. Oh, I need to, boop. Paste. Bam. Done. Let me pull it up in a doc, and then I'll just share it to you guys. That way you can just read it. Because we're not Craft World. I don't know what to tell you, man. I don't know. Because Craft World have some free stratagem interactions also. Copy link. Close out. All right, let's do this. Here. This way I don't have to just read it and read it and read it. You guys can all read it. I sent it in both chats. I don't know if it'll send in both, but there we go. All right, so. And like I said, I understand that it's not the most efficient of lists. I'm not going to tell you it is. And like I said, if you want me to walk you through what I mean by moving everything in tandems, let me know. But for now, what we're going to do is we're going to hop back over to the real space raid, and we're going to talk about why I think it's a little bit better competitively. The points drops and the bonus AP open up some units that didn't necessarily have a lot of play before. First of all, I can start with 6 pain tokens in the real space raid. And there's no reason not to, right? With points drops to certain units, there's no reason not to just slap the homunculus in there and a unit of Rax. If they die, you get another pain token. You can just, perfect, thanks, Nick. You can, if they die, you get a pain token. You can just leave them on a back objective. I understand we have sticky objectives with Kabalites. I rarely use that ability, at least on the backfield. I'll use it on the other ones, but not so much on the backfield. The problem is that you have to be on it at the start of the command phase, And one of the biggest issues we have is that once you take an objective, it's real hard for us to still be on it in our next command phase. Obviously, we can to some degree, but it is very, very difficult. Thank you for... Yeah, no problem. Again, like I said, just bear in mind that I play a weird style, and I will not change my style for anything. I just play what I play, and I'll make it work. And if something doesn't fit, I'll throw it out. But like, since the index has dropped, I've run Lilith and Witches, or a Succubus and Witches, or both. I've run Drazar and Incubi. I have not played a single game without those. Sticky changes to end of phase being denied, so even worse. Gotcha. So it's just one of those like I just don't rely on the sticky objectives most of the time. On the Kabalites or for everybody? Again, I've only dug into some of this. Good. I love it. That's what we're here for. If I wanted to play a shooting game, I wouldn't play this army. It's always been my mantra. So, enhancements. Crucible of Malediction. It's fun. It's cheeky. If we're playing in a competitive scenario, I'm not wasting my time. Like, yes, you can force Battle Shock with a -1. Gotcha. Is that in the commentary also? Or is that in the data slate itself? That'd be in the commentary. A player controls an objective marker at the end of any phase or turn in which their level of control over it is greater than their opponent's. At the end of a turn is determined before any victory points are scored. Okay, that makes sense. Yep. At the end of a turn, objective. Gotcha. Yeah, it's one of those, like, again, I just don't rely on the sticky objectives, though. Like I said, like, it's cheeky, and I do like that, you know, like, the transports get it when the Kabalites are in the transport, so that's pretty handy, and I do use it more than with just, like, on the foot, right? But, so, going back to this, like I said, Crucible of Malediction, it's funny, it's cheeky, putting it on the table every once in a while is worth, but from a competitive standpoint, I wouldn't rely on it. Especially because it's once per game. I don't like spending points personally on something that's once per game. And then in addition to that, usually my homunculus gets the Art of Pain. Because I don't send him anywhere. He just sits, he just camps. And then every turn I get a pain token. So if I go first, I just start with 7 pain tokens. Cool. Blood Dancer. If you're running a base Succubus, you take Blood Dancer. There's no reason not to. Like, it gives her more attacks, it gives her more AP, and now she gets even more AP. I think with the Empower token and Blood Dancer, I want to say she goes up to like -4 or 5, which is absurd. The problem is, again, with no force organizations, everybody's just spamming as many involts as they can, so that doesn't help you there, but it's still funny. Homunculus models, nope. Labyrinthine Cunning, it's too expensive, but it does have some play, being the only way to regenerate command points. And the fact that it's like, you literally can't take anything for, what is it, I think 25 or 30 points. There's no reason not to take it if you're in that boat where you're like, well, I've got like 40 points. Do I take a unit out and reshuffle this? Or do I just slap Labyrinthine Cunning on something? Yeah, slap it on something. If you put it on the Archon, obviously you have to put it on the Archon, but if you put it on the Archon, you can still, because you have the Succubus, because you have all 3, right? Even if you take Lilith, you have all 3. Even if you take Piss Boy, you have all 3. There's no reason not to then, right? If you've got the extra points, there's no reason not to. Stratagems. Prey on the weak. Situationally good. I honestly don't think I've ever used it. I know it exists. But a lot of that, again, goes more into what it is I'm running and the fact that our goddamn boats don't get faction keywords anymore. Right? Like, I can't put the Cabal keyword on any of my boats. I can't put the Witch Cult keyword on any of my boats. So if I've got boys in a transport, the transport can't use Prey on the Weak because the transport doesn't have the Cabal keyword. And that's arguably one of the things that hurt us the most is, like, our transports just got shitty. Like, Venoms are pretty good, but they're still shitty. Because it's like, man, they lost so much coming into this edition. Acrobatic display. You can declare a charge if you fell back or advanced. This is a very underrated strat. And again, it's because a lot of people don't run much Witch Cult outside of Reavers. But as a person who's played Lilith literally every game this edition, I use it a lot. And, you know, with a 4-up invuln, if you put witches into the right unit, like we were saying, Necron Warriors, cool, man. And I probably wouldn't fall back from them anyway, just because I don't want to get overwatched. That's not necessarily the point. But it's like, if you tag the right unit, having the fallback and charge is actually really good. And honestly, I should have used it in my game today against Death Guard, and I didn't. But Reaver's advance and charge, Hellions advance and charge, pretty good. Like, genuinely pretty good, guys. And fallback and charge for Reavers, Hellions fallback and charge innately. Strike and Fade, it is 2 CP, but also very good for both points and protection. You know, again, part of the reason that I just got into the habit of burning secondary or objectives early was because I wanted to make sure that turn 2 I could strike and fade. I wanted that in my pocket in case I needed it, or an interrupt or something, right? Like, I needed those tools. The few things I had that I knew I could use, I needed them. And because this is a full move, I can advance with the Reavers. Like, this is how I scored Capture Enemy Outpost last game I played. I advanced Reavers, and then I strike and fade them, and they moved, 19 plus 16, 35 inches? Like, I just slingshotted them up the board, captured enemy outpost. Worth 8 points. The other thing you can do is, obviously, you can poke a unit out, shoot, and poke it back. That's also an option you have, especially if you line things up to kill. And this was one of the mistakes I made, is I had lined a bunch of stuff up to kill, and none of it died. Like, it was just a dice issue. Like, I just couldn't wound anything. And that's one of those, like, you can't do anything about that. That's why we play dice games. But because I didn't wound anything, I could leave it out in the open, or I could 2 CP and at least move something back. So you have that ability. Alliance of Agony is kind of poopy, right? You discard a pain token. Until the end of the phase, all 3 of those models' units are empowered, but you can only use it if you can select all 3 of the target models stated above. It's this right here that makes this suck. Because it's like, bro, what if one dies, I just lose access to this stratagem? Like, that hurts bad. So it's one of those, like, I remember I have it, but I don't ever plan on using it. But if you've got the Homunculus and you've got Lilith and you've got an Archon on the table, there's no reason not to use it as long as 2 of the 3 are in combat. Insensible to pain, excellent strat. I use it every game. -1 to wound for my Homunculus units. I bring 2 Talos. Excellent strat. Right, or if one's embarked. Correct. And that also hurts. Is like if they're in a transport. So if I play my army the way I'm supposed to play my army, I can't use this stratagem. Thanks, guys. But again, it's one of those like I don't plan on it, but if it lines up, I know it's there. And if I've had the extra points to put the one Labyrinthine Cunning in, I also know it's effectively free. So it's like, yeah, if I've got it, I'll use it. Correct. And that's where I think the real issue with the new detachment is that pain tokens are very plentiful in the real space raid, and command points are at a premium for both. So, and then obviously LFR or Quicksilver reactions. LFR is just lightning fast reactions. -1 to hit. Awesome unit or awesome strat. Again, so of these, the ones that I use every game, I use Insensible to Pain, LFR, or Quicksilver reactions every game. Acrobatic Display I use a lot, but it's not an every game thing. So with the extra AP and the extra AP from being empowered and the points drops, right? I think it opens the door for the raid to just be, from a competitive standpoint, a bit better. I don't think, and again, I think the difference is marginal. And I think what makes it better is that the raid is going to just be easier to play. Not that it's stronger or weaker, just that it's going to have a little bit more margin for error because your resource economy isn't going to be so tightly managed. And historically, in the real space raid, this won't be an exact list, but this will be something along the lines of what I would play if I'm not running a Tantalus. And I'll just kind of put that in the same dock. I'll put it at the bottom. It'll be boop boop. Where's my page break button? Plus page break. So I'll do a page break and it's in there. And again, this isn't like exactly what I run because I kind of like changed some things. Usually I run 20 Cabalites and no racks, but I brought some racks this time. And then if I run a Tantalus, obviously it's still there. So it's one of those, like, just to give you guys an idea of what I would run. What do you mean? Oh, I see. You're asking Caleb. Perfect. Okay. Cool. So that's why I think ultimately the real space raid is going to be overall just better. Is not because it's better, but because for a lot of players, it's going to be less stressful to manage. You're not having to go, oh my gosh, I have 5 good strats and I'm always out of command points. Or, oh my gosh, I'm out of pain tokens. What do I do? You're going to have an abundance of resources. The Hellions points drops do open them up. And going to neg 2 for them does help. Again, the issue is that they're strength 4, when in 9th edition I could get them at strength 6. They're neg 1. They do have sustained hits, which is pretty nice. So, like, empowering them, getting them rerolls and sustained, and the extra AP does make them better. Now, we just have some, and here's the other downside, and that's just a downside to our army. The matchups that we have that are good are very good. Right? It just depends on how we've built our lists, but we have very favorable matchups and do a lot of Necron builds. Obviously, the Catan chart presents its own host of issues. But, like, anything that brings a lot of vehicles and a lot of infantry, good matchups into. If we're doing, like Custodes, I feel very comfortable playing into Custodes. Either Detachment. I would argue that I probably feel better with the other Detachment into Custodes simply because of being able to shut off Overwatch. But at the end of the day, like, I feel fine. I've got Scourges. I can just throw Dark Lances. How many 4-up invulns can you make? You know, because if I throw enough shots, you literally can't make them all. And you'll pick them up eventually. And if I play smart, I can send a transport into them and then send witches into them. And Lilith will do the Lord's work into Custodes. Again, like if you just do the math, Lilith and her witches delete Custodes. It's what they do. It do be what it is. You know, obviously now they have got some good strat support, and that does change things. But if we're just in a vacuum, like I feel very comfortable. I've played some very good Custodes players. I haven't played them with Drukhari yet. No, that's not true. The last time I played Custodes, that was a rough game for the Custodes player, and it was just that reason exactly. It was just like, here's some Dark Lances. Now I'm going to charge you with this boat. And that's actually what ended up winning the game was I sent a Ravager up, and I literally put it like 8 inches from his Custodes. And they were on an objective. Yep. And I shot him off the table. And not all of them, but I shot him with Dark Lances, and he had a choice. What's up, Jimmy? He could either charge me or continue to get shot with Dark Lances. And he chose to charge me and didn't kill the Ravager. And now I was able to just countercharge him with witches, and I didn't have to worry about him getting fight first because he wasn't on an objective. So it's one of those, like, you have to be able to do those types of things, right? Like, if you've got somebody who's got a tool that you don't have, you got to figure out how to take that tool away. So, but that's where it's at. Like, I do think, like I said, the real Space Raiders is still just competitively a better detachment. I like the new detachment. I think it's fun. I think it's flavorful. It fits the way I like to play the game. I still don't understand the point of succubus with witches. It's not expensive. Okay, so I just like them. That's really what it boils down to, my man. uh, and it depends on what you're doing with them. So, again, if we're looking at the new detachment, yes, they will kill Space Marines. If you're looking at the real Space Raid, no, they don't really kill Space Marines, but they'll put a lot of damage on other infantry-heavy armies. The Tyranids right now, a lot of their hotness is Horde. I will make them pick up a whole squad of Termagants. Even with just the base Succubus, not with Lilith. Because those are T4, I can kill those. And then getting empowered neg 2 AP from the Witches means they don't get a save, pick them up. So it's one of those, like, they don't kill a lot, but the things that they do kill, they kill very well. Now, if we're talking Lilith's squad, if it has the infantry keyword, she'll probably kill it. Just her by herself. So shout out to Craft Worlds players who think it's cheeky to put the Spirit Seer into the, Wraith Lord, right? Wraith Lord, my brother actually did that not too long ago. And he was just like, I've got this, and he gets this, and he gets this. And I was like, yeah, but the whole unit has the infantry keyword. And he was like, yeah, so? I was like, cool, I'm going to charge it with Lilith, pick it up. And he was just like, what the shit? And I was like, that's exactly how that works, homie. So it's one of those, like, you also have to pay attention to those types of interactions. When people put infantry units and non-infantry units, the whole unit gets the infantry keyword. 3 more detachment rules for Cabal. That could be a really interesting thing. What I'd like to honestly see, and I think we've kind of talked about everything we're going to. I'm not going to necessarily wrap up right away. Seems GW want to send... again, it just depends, because the issue with witches by themselves still don't do anything. Even in the new detachment, witches by themselves still don't really do anything. And that's the issue, right? So the biggest issue we have with our army, the detachment doesn't fix. And that's that our bad data sheets are still just bad. Didn't fix that. It just made some things a little bit more usable. And it made the play a little bit more fun. Yep, no problem. I'm not going to try to pronounce your name because I can't. It looks like Ilyas Dono, but I guess I did try to pronounce it. Sorry. You can fit 2 Wraith Lords with attached Spirit Seers in a single Falcon. Rules as written. You can. No, maybe not. Let me check that because it depends on how the transport is worded. Because if it says models, technically you cannot. And that's where it gets weird. The keyword interactions are kind of stupid and don't make sense. Yep. So the way it works is the unit gets the keyword, but every model in the unit doesn't get the keyword. And it's one of those where it's one of the most asinine and stupid interactions I've come across in this game. And because the unit gets the keyword and I make attacks against the unit, my anti-infantry works against the unit. But because Falcons specifically say model and the model doesn't get the keyword, it doesn't work. And it's also why they can't move through terrain, because terrain, like ruined walls, right? Like the walls for ruins, say infantry models can move through it, not units. So when you put the Spirit Seer into the unit, he gives the unit the keyword, but that doesn't give the Wraith Lord the keyword. And again, it's very asinine, it's very stupid, but if it didn't work that way, you get things like you just said, Nick, where you could fit 2 Wraith Lords and Spirit Seers in a Falcon, and then they could also just walk through walls. And that's why it's that asinine the way it is. But yeah, going back to the comment about witches, like, they just suck. But the characters are good. Like, the Succubus is good. Especially, again, in the Real Space Raid where she gets the Blood Dancer. And witches are serviceable in the new detachment, and they're borderline good with an attached character, because getting sustained hits and +1 to wound and -2 AP, yes, that's how the keywords work. It's a weird kind of model versus unit interaction. Yep. So but like the Succubus giving sustained hits, and then +1 to wound and empower for -2 means I can wound Marines on 4s if we're just using base Marines, right? At -2 with 30 dice. So if I can send a 10-man even into Terminators at 30 dice with rerolls and sustained hits, you're getting about 27. So again, we're right back at that same math, right? And it's Custodes math. We're still killing with that squad, on average, 5 to 6 Terminators with like 140 points worth of models. I think the easiest fix for witches is instead of giving them +1 to wound, they just get anti-infantry. You leave them strength 3 so they can't just like delete vehicles the way they used to. You just give them anti-infantry 3 up and you move on with your life. And I feel like that's fair. And they can even go up in points then, that's fine. But at least then base witches still have a role. I don't have to have a character to make them feel like they're worth bringing. All right. So I think we covered everything we saw in the chat so far. Quick question before we end this, because it's getting close to dinner time for me. Are any of you interested in seeing what I mean by running them in tandem if you're using Venoms for your witches? I'm going to check something real quick, and then I'll check the chat and let me know. If I don't hear back in a minute or two, I'm going to assume that's a no, and or have their special weapons do something. Agreed. Full agree. What? Oh, I got to close out. Messages. But yeah, let me know real quick. I'm going to check this. Heck yeah. All right, that's what I like to hear. Okay. I don't need to check that right now. Cool, cool, cool. All right, we'll do it real quick. By all means, I'd like to see how you manage it. I have a lot of gray hair, man. That's how. You can't see it right now, but there's a lot in there. Let's see. GW layout. Let's go layout 1. Nope, not a Reddit picture. Those don't. Open image in new tab. Nope. What is this? Images. Get out of here. Stupid Chrome and your stupid updates. Don't you know I'm a boomer? I can't handle updates. There we go. Boop. Epic pen. All right, can everybody see it? Yeah, you should be able to. Question from the back, any old world content plans? Yes. If you haven't noticed, James, I've already been sneaking old world stuff in there. I am a Wood Elf player. 100% yes. And I've already done some. Like I did a walkthrough on how magic works and a few other things. And so absolutely, more old world content is coming. It is going to, actually, I'm going to do at least 1 to 2 videos this week on the old world. We're going to do another like how-to for some of the core rules, and I'm going to talk about Wood Elves, and I'm going to break down the scoring packet that we plan on using for tournaments as well. I know I've done it a little bit, but I'm going to fully break it down. Okay, so we've got our deployment zone already on here, thankfully. So here's what I mean by running them in tandem. And obviously, like, what we're going to do is we're going to assume there's no forward deploys and stuff like that. We're just going to assume everything is as perfect as it can be for this example because you can't account for everything, right? What I'm probably going to do is if I know I can't get charged turn 1, I'm going to have 1 here. Can you guys see that X? That looks really light. Is my transparency turned way down? Undo. Oh, it's on highlighter. That's why. Pen. There we go. So I'll probably try to put like 1 here and 1 here, or even 1 like maybe over here and over here. All we really want to do, yeah, I think that's a lot better. All we really want to do is make sure if we don't go first, our opponent can't just like whip up here and blast them off the table. So however you need to do that based off of your opponent, but if we assume we can put them like here and here, and then the other 2, I might put like here and here. And I might actually, what I'll probably do is I'll probably put 1 here and here. Because I'll probably put Talos down here because they can take the hit better, right? If I'm going first, I'm going to probably pick, and again, I keep telling everybody the way I play is I cut the board in half and I play half the table at a time. Right? Like I'm not going to sit here and stress out about take every objective. I'm going to do the easiest secondary I can score. I'm going to maybe take 1 other objective, and it's going to be the most like boring, uninteractive turn 1. So I might advance these to get them back up here, but I need them both to be up here. And if I go first, and honestly, because I've got mandrakes, I'm probably putting the mandrakes here. And if I go first, I might just stay there. You know, I might reposition them to kind of bait a charge or to get some kind of shooting baited out. So I might like line them up here so that if my opponent wants to shoot me, they at least have to come here or around or around. You know, because if they get in here, I can at least bring something. If it's infantry, I can bring both the Venoms and shoot and have 12 splinter cannon shots going into them. You know, if they charge, that's really what we want, right? So turn 1, these will move, but they're going in pairs. And here's why. Is let's say our opponent does charge onto the objective. we don't, again, chances are it's not going to be Terminators turn 1 charging. It could be, but it's probably not. Let's assume it's just Marines. Even if it's Terminators, you're probably okay. What we're going to do is, again, most boards are going to actually be U's, not L's. We're going to move and disembark, move and disembark. So what we'll do, let me clear some of this up, is we're going to bring witches. We want to make it so they can't overwatch. And if they can't, then we move them as far as we can, right? But then what we're going to do is we're going to bring the Venom around, and we're going to bring the Venom around. So once you're done with this movement, you're going to have one Witch Squad, one Witch Squad, one Venom, one Venom. And the exact placement isn't what's important here. It's just understanding the concept. So again, let's assume they charge the Mandrakes, and actually this happened the other day. Let's assume they had charged the Mandrakes and they don't kill them all because they just have bad dice, and my headphones just broke, but that's okay. Let's assume they don't kill them all because of bad dice, or you had really good invulns. Doesn't matter. All we need to know is there's one Mandrake left in the squad, because now what we can do is once we get into position, we can fall the Mandrake back. And if it's Marines, when it comes time to the charge phase, obviously we'll soften them up with the Venom cannons, but if it comes time for the charge phase, what we're going to do is we're going to charge with the Venom first to make sure they can't overwatch, then charge with both Witches, then charge with the other Venom. So we're going to get 4 units, and actually we'll probably charge with both Venoms first, just to make sure we can't move block our Venoms out of being able to charge. Because you have to base if you can. So it's one of those, if you get both Venoms in, you don't have to worry about it. You'll be able to get all 10 Witches in. That's easy enough. But now I have 2 units of Witches in. One should have a character. When you fly them in tandems, you want the Succubus in one, and you want the Witches in one, and you want to move them as pairs, and you want to charge them as pairs. And it's not the most efficient when it comes to strat usage, but it lets us use the Venoms, which also minimizes some of our strat usage, if that makes sense, again, in the new detachment. So if we assume they're regular Marines, we're going to have either a Succubus or Lilith, doesn't matter which, take your pick. Let's pretend it's a Succubus today. You're going to have a Succubus and 5 Witches, and then you're going to have 5 Witches. When you activate to fight, you're going to activate with the Succubus first, and you're going to empower both of them, but not the boats. You're going to activate the Succubus first, and what you're going to do is you're going to fight with her first, right? She's going to get 6 attacks. She's going to hit on 2s, full hit rerolls with sustained hits. What that's going to do is that's going to net you, 6? You actually you on average fail 1. So you're actually going to average 7 hits with your 6 attacks. Now what you're going to do then, and that actually might come out to 8, but you're going to roll your wounds there. She's neg 2 base, goes to neg 3 when she's empowered because she doesn't get the Blade Dancer. And then you're going to wound them on 3s, which means you're going to average 5 wounds at neg 3. Maybe 6 if you got the 8 hits. And so that's going to do what? 6 wounds will do 5 damage to the Marines. So she kills 2.5 by herself. But now the 5 Witches are going to swing, and it's 15 attacks. And again, we're going to average about 15 hits. It's going to be 14, 13.5. And we're going to wound on 4s. So we're going to average 6.5 wounds, right? So we're going to average, we'll round it down to 6. But those are going to be neg 2, so that's 5 up. So they're going to fail out of 6 we said? They're going to fail 4 of them. So we've now killed 4.5 Marines. Not enough to kill the squad, but enough that your opponent's going to go, well, shit, that's not even worth an interrupt now. And so then you have the second 5-man able to just take them out, kill them completely, get you 1 pain token. Yes, it costs you 2, but we're operating under the assumption that there are other things going on all over the board, right? And you'll have Chronos somewhere, but they'll both be able to kill that Marine squad, and then with the Marines being dead, and the Venoms still being right there at the end of the fight phase, they now get to hop back into the Venoms. And so, because we're using Venoms, we don't have to spend the CP to get them in a Raider. It gets your command point management becomes a little easier, but your pain token management becomes a little harder, is the problem. The other option you have is like, let's say this is a U. If you can always leave the Venoms back behind the wall and charge, but now you're playing a dangerous game of, do I get outside of 6 inches of these Venoms and lose the ability to hop back in them? So it's one of those like, is what it is. You just have to know your positioning. And this is where I think, like I said, the real space raid gets a little easier, because now we're playing a more surgical game with the new detachment. Unless, of course, you just smooth brain Kabbalites. But even that has to be more surgical because your resource management's just tighter. And then on the other side of the board, I've got 2 Venoms, one with Lilith and one with Witches in tow, ready to do the same exact thing. Your other option is to run the 2 character Venoms in tandem to maximize your damage output, and there is nothing wrong with that. And then you just use the 2 5-man Witch ones. You don't even have to run those in tandem. They just become utility, screens, blocks, stuff like that. And then that it's one of those, like, you either maximize your damage output by running the characters as pairs, but then your other witches just become more like utility, or you just have 2 that have like not maximized damage output but still good damage potential into the right targets. If you're running Incubi in a Venom, would you suggest that a new player to the faction start at real space and then try Splinter Detachment when more confident with the army? That is a great question. Yes, I think you build a list. If you ultimately know you want to do the new detachment and you know that's where you want to go, you build a list that you think would work for that detachment, and then you just kind of get some games in with Real Space Raid just to kind of get more of a feel for the army and then swap over. I think, because what I think will happen is, if you're fairly new to the army, what's going to happen is you have the potential to get overwhelmed by the lack of resources and the resource management, and it can be very disheartening. You know, starting with 3 pain tokens and having an uphill battle the whole game to get more is going to be a little disheartening potentially, compared to I just start with like 6 or 5, and then so it becomes a little easier because you have more to start with. It just gives you a buffer to work with, so I think that is a very good idea. But what I would do is I would probably make a list that's like 70% kitted for the new detachment, 30% for raid. Yes, and it's going to require a lot more. And I don't know if you guys saw the Art of War bat rep. First of all, that guy's list was not good. And it wasn't. Not only was it not good from just a person who loves this army, but from a competitive standpoint, that is not a good list. So it was interesting that that's what they showcased on their stream, and dude got blasted. It was like 33 to 76 or something. And that's what I've seen from most of the battle reports that I've seen, is they're just getting blasted. And I'm just like, shock, man. It's like all these players who are just like Drukhari too good forgot, yes, that's the one, buddy. They forgot that we're just T3 bodies with 1 wound and almost no defensive capabilities. So it's like, yes, this new detachment does help our damage output a little bit, but we still die to a stiff breeze, and we still struggle at killing things. And our bad matchups are just really bad. Would this strategy work with a unit of Hellions paired up with the Lilith Succubus? Actually, yes, it would. It would very well. The only thing the Hellions wouldn't get that the Witches do is the +1 to wound because of the Lance. No. That's a great question. I assume we're talking about the running in tandem. That's a great question, and yeah, it would. Like I said, the only thing the Hellions wouldn't get is just the +1 to wound from Lance. But what Hellions do have is at T4 and 2 wounds. So it's one of those like, and 2 damage swings. So that could also be a very good way to run in tandem. And because they also don't have the infantry keyword, Hellions are a little bit less susceptible to some of the anti-infantry stuff out there. So it's one of those like, absolutely. That is a great question. And yes, even Reavers, like a 3-man of Reavers wouldn't be terrible to run in tandem as well. And that's honestly like, my brain didn't think of that. So I'm glad you asked that question. Because like in retrospect, hell yeah, like that works really well. And arguably that would work better than another Venom full of witches. And you could save the points on the Venoms to bring the Hellions. It's only a 5-point difference. And just have 5 witches on the ground doing action monkey stuff, screening out backfields, stuff like that. And that wouldn't be a bad way to go. Absolutely. And like I said, Reavers could do the same thing. Their damage output isn't as good, but they also give you two of the one model in a 3-man can take Lance, and it has anti-infantry 3 up for the sergeant if you give it the agonizer. So again, because you're just going to be hitting the same types of units, it works very well. Where I think Hellions and Reavers would struggle is into more elite infantry because they don't get the +1 to wound. But I think in most situations, that's a very good strategy. I think, again, if you're playing against like a lot of Custodes or Terminator heavy lists, that's where you're going to be like, man, witches are just a little bit better because of the +1 to wound, and I'm just pushing them to their invuln anyway. So, yeah, so really, that upgrade should give the whole unit Lance, but also Reavers should just have AP on their melee base. But what do I know? I'm just a smooth brain, man. Right? But yeah, so that's what I mean by running them in tandem. Run them in pairs. You don't want them, because that was the mistake I made the first 2 games. And the first 2 games were against my buddy John and against my brother. And I did beat my brother, but it was a very close game. And then with my buddy John, it was not close. It was like, I don't remember. I scored 32 points, and they were basically all secondary. I didn't score any primaries. Part of it was the mission, because if I remember right, the mission... No, I scored 4 points in primary, because it was 2 points per turn. But I just couldn't hold objectives. And then again, like, because I wasn't running my Venoms in tandem, I wasn't able to kill things. And that game is where I was like, oh shit, I can make this work. And I actually made that adjustment mid-game. And the problem was that it was too little too late. But then it was like, okay, now I'm able to pick up his orc boys. Because now I'm throwing 10 witches into it, even if it's not one blob of 10. The only downside is if dice are bad, you do run the risk of getting interrupted, and then the unit that didn't fight, but at the same time, you still have a unit stuck in, and if they fall back, desperate escape. Because you're not charging witches into anything but infantry for the most part. I mean, +1 to wound does open it up to a few other things, just because of weight of dice. But again, for the most part, you're going to send them into infantry or anything that's like T4, right? So, I don't know if that answers everybody's questions. Uh, Again, don't be like me. Probably put some cab lights in your lists. It will also take some of the pressure off. I just love witches, and I was like, I'm running witches. This is what I want to run for the league. I have an excuse to now. My first game will be this week. I believe it's against Marines. Fortunately, I love playing against Marines. Um, Nothing brings me more joy than making Marine players pick up their models. And again, I mean it tongue in cheek to some degree. Like, I'm not trying to put anybody down. I don't enjoy power armor. I don't enjoy Space Marines. So I'm just like, hey, let's kill Marines, guys. I'm about it. So I will do a league recap on that match once I have it. I gotta get a hold of him and schedule it. And James, I think you had asked me about old world content. Is there anything specifically you'd like to see? Like I said, I plan on doing at least one Wood Elf video, and I plan on doing something on the core rules. But if if there's nothing specific you'd like to see, then I'll definitely just find something. Yeah, thanks a lot, guys. I appreciate it. Also, I don't remember who it was, but I did get somebody who's now a member. They subscribe to the YouTube channel. Let's actually look at that so I can give them a proper thank you. Um, you know, real quick. Let me look that up. And oh gosh, we also just got 4 or 5 new subscribers in the last hour. So again, big thanks to everybody there. Army Reviews is a strong open magic items, lures of magic. Uh, I could definitely go over lures of magic this week. Magic items I'll probably do when I do army reviews. So I'll start with lures of magic and then I'll find a core rule how to, and then I'll do my wood elf stuff also. But like I said, let me check that real quick. Memberships. Kevin White. So again, big shout out. Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate it. You know, again, I don't. I definitely appreciate that we've gotten 5 subscribers in the last hour. So again, big thank you to everybody out there. There's not much content out there as there should be. Lots of battle recepts, not many. And that's so James. That's what I'm finding with even with 40k is that people will give like reviews, but they don't break things down. So, all right, guys, I got to go get dinner. It's that time. I appreciate everybody hanging out with me for a couple of hours. Again, thank you for the subscriptions. Thank you for the memberships. You guys have a great one, and we'll see you later this week with some old world content. Thanks a lot.